Hi, this is Brian Hyde. Just checking in for Loving Liberty. Wanted to give you a quick update on some of the developments in the trial of the FBI agent W. Joseph Astorita, who is on trial right now in Portland, Oregon, over a couple of shots that were taken at LaVoy Finicum, which are not accounted for. Anytime police fire their weapons in the line of duty, anytime a life is taken in the line of duty, there's some pretty strict accountability there. And so they go through everyone's firearms. They want to know who fired, how many times they fired. They have to account for every round of ammunition that they took with them on the assignment. They have to account for every round that was expended. And most of you are probably quite familiar with the events of January 26th of 2016, in which LaVoy Finicum was killed at a police ambush there on Highway 395 in Oregon. But unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending on how you look at it, there are some very strong inconsistencies. And right now, there are fingers being pointed back and forth between the FBI and the Oregon State Police. LaVoy was killed by two Oregon State troopers, both of whom have spent the last couple of days on the stand. Now, I want you to understand that this has to be an agonizing thing for Jeanette Finicum, who is in Portland at this time and is following those proceedings, getting ready for her own wrongful death suit to go forward. Jeanette has been kind enough to call in and check in on my radio show, and we get some very short updates. I've really wished I could speak to her attorney, Morgan Philpott, but there's protocols that they have to follow, and there's things that they want to do to make sure that they don't jeopardize the wrongful death suit that they are pursuing. And there are a lot of things coming out in this FBI agent's trial that may very well prove helpful for that wrongful death suit. Unfortunately, for the last couple of days, as I mentioned, they've had a couple of Oregon State Police on the stand. These are the two troopers who actually fired the fatal shots that took LaVoy Finicum's life. And it seems like the trial shifted from accountability for the FBI and inconsistencies in the stories of these, or in the accounts of these highly trained hostage rescue team members like Astorita, and who actually fired those shots. Fingers are pointed back and forth. It's interesting. I'm wondering right now if the friction between the FBI and the OSP, who's going to throw who under the bus first? It's tragic on so many levels, but it's also tragic when you have people who have been entrusted literally with the power over life and death who cannot honestly take responsibility. And in fact, they've gone to great lengths to protect the identities of the officers who actually fired the fatal shots. Officer 1, as he is called, is the one who definitively fired the two fatal shots that first struck LaVoy. His name has been kept secret. His identity has been kept secret. In a strange twist of fate, his name did come out in court today, as it was mentioned inadvertently by some of those who were trying the case. And there are what the court is calling security issues. Now, look, I'm not trying to downplay that there's a lot of anger, and justifiably, at these men for the role that they played in ending the life of a peaceful man who never threatened anyone, who never pointed a gun at anyone, who never caused harm to anyone, never had so much as a speeding ticket in his life. But because they were fed what can only be called fake news by news organizations, by non-governmental organizations like the Center for Biological Diversity, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which described LaVoy and those who were occupying the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge with him as domestic terrorists and sovereign citizens, militants and armed, interlopers. They were prepared for the worst. So you had law enforcement very alert. Scared isn't probably an inappropriate word. They were afraid of what might happen, and with no arrest warrant, with no probable cause statement, they set up to stop LaVoy and others who were traveling to John Day to meet with, among other people, the sheriff, Glenn Palmer. So here these guys were on their way to go to meet with law enforcement. Law enforcement set up not a traffic stop. This was not being pulled over for any traffic violation. There was no reason to stop them. There was no reason to set up the ambush. but they essentially put LaVoy on trial for the last couple of days. And it's like the classic wife beater saying, "You made me do this to you." And so that's what the court proceedings have been like for the last couple of days. These officers trying to explain why they did what they did. And it's safe to say that they were fed bad information from the beginning. Overblown reactions were the natural result, and unfortunately a very good man's life was taken in the process. Now, so far, no direct accountability has stuck. There are some interesting facts that have come forward as far as the number of shots fired, who was standing where, and they haven't really explained why they chose to escalate the situation into one where there could be absolutely no margin for error, where it came down to either submit or we resort to lethal force. That's the situation they created in order to stop these individuals, and that's ultimately what cost LaVoy his life. I have to point out, though, that Jeanette, in talking on the radio today, took the moral high ground, as she has at every point, as LaVoy did at every point. When the name of this officer was revealed in court inadvertently, rather than publish his name, rather than, get it out there and, essentially, let's put the pressure on him now that we know who he is, Jeanette did not go about publishing his name. I'm not going to do it either. It's out there for those who want to see it. But again, the threat, well, there's a threat to this officer. We just know the militia is waiting to exact revenge. No, they're not. There's no proof of that. There is no credible threat. No one who mourns the death of LaVoy Finicum is advocating step up and go, get frontier justice on this officer. Now, there are a lot of people who do want to see justice. And most likely that is going to come during Jeanette's wrongful death trial. But in the meantime, that elusive accountability is still being sought. And still, those who acted in the name of government and who acted with such a horrific overreaction to what they perceived or were told was domestic terrorism, they don't want to take accountability. They want to hide their identity. They want to make sure that everything they did is kept as quiet as possible, or at least their identities are kept as separate from it as possible. So I'm just going to ask you this. Is that, when you do something, when you engage in something, is it a good sign that you're doing something that is noble or that is right if your first instinct is, I have to hide my face or I have to do this in secret? Think about that. Just because government does something does not automatically make it righteous. If it would have been wrong for you or me to fire shots at a peaceful individual who had done nothing to harm anyone, it's just as wrong for government to do that as well, regardless of whatever bad information they may have been given and what their expectations were. This is terribly exhausting emotionally and physically for Jeanette. I can only imagine how hard it is to sit in the courtroom and to see the people who took your loved one from you. It's got to be harder still from the standpoint of watching them actively ducking responsibility or doing everything they can to try to create, some reasonable doubt so that they can skate on it. Well, that's where we stand for the time being. So far, there is no direct accountability, but there are some facts coming out that likely will prove helpful in that wrongful death suit. And we will be there to keep you posted. If you tune in, the Loving Liberty radio show between 1 and 2 p.m. Mountain Time each day that they're in court, I connect up with Jeanette. We get a short 5 to 10 minute update, and she is a trooper herself for providing this information for us at considerable cost. So thank you for following this update. Continue to follow us. And there are a lot of other good sources, a lot of other folks out there too also reporting on this. But for those who have been depending on us, please spread the word. Let people know that we are helping to get the word out about this trial as well. And we will also be bringing you coverage of Jeanette's wrongful death suit as it moves forward in Oregon. Thank you.